Fans, I'm Miles Barno with Auburn 24/7 Sports at auburnundercover.com. I'm here with Brandon, and we just got out of our press conference tonight with Chip Lindsey.
Yeah, it was. He said a lot of things, but not provided a lot of info, which you would expect on game week. But I did find it interesting that he spoke a lot about, game planning and getting ready for that first opponent, and how obviously when you install a playbook throughout the preseason, you're pretty much putting a lot of stress on the players. You're making them learn all these plays, their situational plays and everything. But then when it gets to game week, they pare that down to just a kind of a handful of plays that they want to perfect, that they feel good with, heading into that opener, and what they feel like will work very well against Georgia Southern. And so the players are a little bit more relaxed and everything. They know kind of what they're going to run after they have their meetings heading into the week. And what I found interesting about that, I mean, that's nothing new. Everybody knows they pare playbooks down for games. But Jarrett Stidham, the quarterback, seems to be pretty involved with Chip Lindsey and trying to figure out what to run, what not to run, what he's comfortable with, which a lot of coaches will ask the quarterback, hey, what are you comfortable with? But it seems like, based off what Jarrett Stidham said and Chip Lindsey, Jarrett Stidham will walk in the room and go, hey, what do you think about this and what do you think about that? They sound like they're sounding boards for each other, which I thought was pretty interesting. And, that shows you how much, I think, confidence Chip Lindsey has in Jarrett Stidham as a starting quarterback, and vice versa as for the offensive coordinator, Chip Lindsey. But it'd be interesting to see, like, what happened Saturday and then go and ask, like, so whose idea was this and whose idea was that, and, all that. I doubt they'll ever tell us, but it's interesting because Chip says that Chip Lindsey said Jarrett Stidham will not be checking out of plays a lot, which, as you know, when you line up on the field, if he sees something and he doesn't think the play is going to work, he can check out of it. But Chip Lindsey said that he hopes that doesn't happen a lot. It sounds like this is going to be an offense, much like in the past with Gus Malzahn, even though it was a zone read. Some of the plays are, even if they are reads, they're not really reads. They're pre-called from the sideline, and they run it anyway. So that was kind of interesting to me, just about the game plan and what they're doing heading into this week and then heading into the opener.
Yeah, and Chip did mention also that, with practice, you've got a week up until the next game, and there's not a lot of time to go through every single play you've got in your playbook, so you've got to really pick and choose and talk to Jarrett and find out which worked best with him and with the offensive line.
Yeah, and especially when you're working in a first-time starter at quarterback for you. I mean, he's played at Baylor, but it's been 2 years. I would not be surprised, if they had to, if they had to come out and it was like a very simple-looking playbook, because Jarrett's got to knock off some rust. I'm sure he's going to be nervous going into the game. He hasn't played in 2 years, and I'm interested to see what they do. I'm still sticking to my prediction they come out and throw the ball like immediately, just to kind of excite the fans, but also maybe just give Jarrett Stidham some confidence.
Yeah, and actually we asked Chip about that tonight, whether he thinks we'll be throwing or running the ball, and he kind of gave us a mixed response on that, not really a direct answer.
Yeah, a lot of the chatter going into the season has been Auburn's probably going to throw the ball more or whatever, but Chip made it sound like, maybe not. We might actually just keep it about what it was with the running plays. And, in fact, he didn't even really say passing. I think, in fact, in his quote when he was talking, he says, we may run it. And I thought that was interesting because the big talk, even the question was phrased, at A-Day, the spring game, you guys came out throwing the ball a lot and didn't not only throw it a lot, but you weren't afraid to throw it in different situations. Auburn, the knock on Auburn over the last few years has been they won't throw the ball on first down. And so teams know what to expect on first down, and that puts Auburn in a hole early. But the thing with Chip has been, we're going to throw the ball on first down. But then tonight he's kind of like, he might do whatever. But I think Chip maybe was like that just because it's game week. You see these coaches change a little bit in what they say when they know an opponent is trying to parse every word that they're saying and take exactly what they're saying maybe at face value, or seeing whether the guy may be saying the opposite of what he actually thinks. It's a crazy mind games and gamesmanship every week between coaching staffs. But I personally think they're going to throw the ball more this year. They have to, because they have a better quarterback. And two, they've got to let people respect the passing game so they can help this offense be more successful, because it has struggled at times these last two seasons.
And do you think we'll see primarily Jarrett in the first game, or is Gus going to have another indecision and use a couple of
I would hope that he doesn't pull a Clemson game last season and go, yeah, Jarrett Stidham's a starter, but we're gonna play 2-3 more quarterbacks. I suspect that they'll play Jarrett all the way. And in relation to that, Chip Lindsey was asked about their Wildcat quarterback tonight and whether we'll see that. And he said, I don't know if you'll see it in the first game, but we do have the package, and we will probably run it at some point. He doesn't know if it'll be the first game. He says they have multiple options that they can utilize. He says he obviously knows Kerryon Johnson has run the Wildcat quarterback for them before, but he wasn't committed to saying, yeah, it'll be Kerryon Johnson, the tailback at Wildcat quarterback. I went back and did some research, on Chip Lindsey's offense. He used the Wildcat formation quite a bit at Arizona State last season. In fact, the Arizona paper there, azcentral.com, reported that there was a game, I think it was week 2, 20 of their 59 plays utilized the Wildcat quarterback. They called it Sparky there because Sun Devils, and I guess that's funny. But they ran 20 of 59 plays in that formation. And then they had to run it a little bit more later in the season out of necessity because they had so many injuries at quarterback. They had to utilize a running back at quarterback, so they used the Wildcat formation more. But Wildcat formation is not going anywhere, but I would suspect you're probably not going to see it a lot this season if Jarrett Stidham is as good as they hope. Because if you have a great quarterback, you stick with that. You don't try and mess up that rhythm by putting another guy back there.
Yeah. And definitely a lot of high expectations for Jarrett. I mean, since the spring, we've heard nonstop about how great he's going to be, and Auburn's excited, but do you think that maybe he will take him a little while to warm back up to the game?
I would not be surprised by that. I specifically because, one, he hadn't played in 2 years, but also another reporter brought up a good point tonight. Georgia Southern's defense is pretty good at times, and their strength going into this season is believed to be their secondary, which would mean, obviously, that would not be a great matchup for Auburn in throwing the ball and with the receivers. I think that they'll try to warm him up into it, but I also think that they will try to throw quite a bit on the first couple of drives to get him warmed up and go from there. And if he's not doing well, they'll start running the ball more. But I think they have to come out throwing with him to get that confidence going, get it back. So by the next week when he goes to Clemson, he's not going to be as rattled going on the road and have to throw the ball. Otherwise, if he struggles early against Georgia Southern, they will have to start running the ball, and then they'll go back to him trying to throw. And the last thing you want to do is have a guy that doesn't feel comfortable throwing the ball as consistently as they have been apparently in practices. But I think they're going to throw the ball quite a bit. I'm not going to say they're going to throw the ball more than run, but I think they're going to give Jarrett Stidham multiple opportunities to stretch the field, much like they did in the A-Day spring game, even though Chip Lindsey says, maybe that's not exactly what we'll do.
Yes. Let's see if we've got any questions from our viewers. Let's see.
I'm sure someone's got some.
Oh, yes.
A lot of football, and I'm sure some people have softball questions. Not like literally like softball. Here's a softball question, but like a questions about the softball.
No, I wish they were soft softball questions. Let's see. Do you think that our defense will struggle against triple option?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, Kevin Steele has talked a lot about that, the defensive coordinator for Auburn, about how, they just don't face that anymore. You don't face it anymore unless you're in the ACC and you're playing Georgia Tech, which Kevin Steele has had to prepare for in recent years. He was Clemson's defensive coordinator just a few years ago, if you remember, and he had to prepare for Paul Johnson's triple option, their option attack at Georgia Tech. So he's got some ideas of how to defend it. Most coaches do, but he's got firsthand experience. And I think what's going to make it particularly maybe more difficult for Auburn, though I think Auburn will be able to shut them down just because of talent, but what make it more difficult for them is their quarterback for Georgia Southern is playing for the first time ever on the college level. They have no tape to review on him other than what he did in high school. Right. So, and he's a dual threat guy, so you don't know how much freedom he'll have, whether things will be pre-called from the sideline, whether they'll do some read plays where he can read and react to a defensive end and decide to keep the ball or, toss it out, or if everything's going to be predetermined because he's a new quarterback and Auburn's going to be able to sniff it out pretty quickly on defense and shut down the Georgia Southern's offense. But I would suspect Georgia Southern's going to throw in some new wrinkles just because it's a new quarterback and kind of try to catch Auburn off guard. But in the end, the talent's going to catch up no matter what. Even if Auburn is struggling early against them defensively, Auburn's talent on defense will shut them down at some point.
Yeah, I mean, although Auburn is definitely, more talented and player-wise, I think that no one tonight seemed to be underestimating Southern, and everyone seems really set in preparation and trying to get in the right mindset to defeat them.
Yeah, Kevin Steele mentioned that last week. So did Gus Malzahn. I mean, this is a program that has won multiple national titles on the FCS level. They moved up to the Division I or FBS level back in 2014. If you remember, back when they were an FCS team, they beat Florida at Florida back in 2013. Obviously, different team now, and this team was 5-7 last year under a first-year coach, so they weren't that great. But they have taken big-time programs in the SEC, Florida and Georgia, in fact, to the brink, and has even beaten one in Florida. So they're going to use that in the building to kind of get them focused on this team. But also, as we've mentioned before on here, look no further than 2 years ago when Auburn almost lost to in-state FCS opponent Jacksonville State and had to go to overtime to beat them. I'm sure that Gus Malzahn is reminding the players that were on this team about it, but also even the new players going, listen, you might be more talented or whatever, but those guys, this is their Super Bowl in a lot of ways for Georgia Southern. That they're going to be playing harder than they ever have played because this is an opportunity for them to make a huge, huge statement. But in the end, I think Auburn's talent will come through. But I just don't see it being a close game. But I think it's the right attitude, obviously, for them to be taking with this team because you just never know. That's why they play. That's why they don't play games on paper. They play it on the field. Yeah,
certainly. I mean, you never want to underestimate an opponent and end up unprepared.
Yeah.
But here was an interesting question, I thought. Do you think we'll show much against Georgia State? Georgia State with Clemson up next.
Well, Georgia Southern.
Georgia Southern.
Yeah, that's all right.
Georgia State.
Auburn plays Georgia State, I think, in a year or two. But yeah, Georgia's
coming.
Georgia Southern. I think they'll try to hold back on some things, but I also don't think they're going to hold back just to do it. They've got to get in a rhythm with a new quarterback with Jarrett Stidham. They have to get Cameron Petway and Kerryon Johnson back in the rhythm of being tackled because they haven't really been tackling them all that much in these scrimmages and practices. So you've got to get them ready. You can't be real conservative, and I don't think they will be. They'll certainly hold some things back, but it also goes back to the game planning thing. They've got things back in their mind for Clemson that they believe will work better against Clemson than Georgia Southern, and so that's one thing. But also, I'm sure they've got some special things in store for Clemson as well because that is a huge, huge game, obviously, and they're going to pull out all the stops to try and win it. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Chip will be pulling out some of those plays he said that might not have gotten so much time this week in practice. What role will Byron Cowart be playing in this defense? Man, everybody wants to know about Byron Cowart.
I do.
I just don't see him on the field that much until maybe it's a blowout at the end of the game. I mean, listen, we haven't heard much about him other than he's probably the fifth or fourth defensive tackle at this point, which makes him obviously a backup and maybe a backup's backup at one of the two tackle spots. So I don't know. I think they're going to try and get him on the field to see what he can do and maybe get him some confidence. Maybe that's just what the guy needs is some confidence. But as it stands now, I'm not expecting a lot from him this season.
Right. Let's see. Do you think White will be the Wildcat QB?
I don't, because he would be killed. But Sean White's the backup quarterback. I don't think he'd be the Wildcat. Wildcat quarterback's kind of set aside, obviously, for the more of a runner, the speedy running back that they want to put out there and play. Not the typical passer. I think he'll be the backup. Interestingly, though, Chip Lindsey said tonight that Malik Willis is still getting snaps with the second-team offense, which I thought was interesting going to game week. I figured that he would be strictly third-team or scout team, and especially this week because it's a dual-threat quarterback they're facing, and you want to put them on scout team so that Auburn's first-team defense can face a dual-threat quarterback because Malik's really the only dual threat they have on the team. So I find it interesting he's practicing the second team a little bit. I don't think that means he's going to play. It just seems like they're keeping him ready, and they're going to keep him ready throughout the season just in case they want to play him.
Do you think they are still committed to wanting to redshirt him, or do you think that may not happen now?
I think they are, but, at some point in the season, you have to make the decision of whether to play a guy or sit him. And that sometimes it's made, a week ago before they even enter game week preparations. A lot of players, that has been decided. I think they would love to redshirt him, as they've said, but, if Stidham were to go down with injury, that brings up an interesting question. What if Sean White goes in there and then he gets injured or he really struggles? I mean, and I think the reason why Chip Lindsey even says that about, working Malik at second-team quarterback sometimes is because he went through that whole ordeal at Arizona State last season where they played 5 different players at quarterback. I think 4 of them were actually quarterbacks because they had so many injuries. So I think Chip Lindsey's like walking on eggshells every time he's asked that question because he's like, he could play because you never know. I just experienced it last season.
Right.
But I think they would love to redshirt him.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think Jarrett's a little worried about that as well after kind of experiencing the same thing at Baylor with his injury and some others. So.
Yeah, listen, I mean, his last play was him hearing the snap of his ankle. Well, maybe he didn't hear it, but it was that would be creepy.
Well, he says he remembers his last snap.
Yeah, his last snap was a snap. He broke his ankle. But, you've got to be a little anxious going out there and knowing, okay, the last time I was out here, I broke a bone and my season ended. So that's kind of goes back to what I was saying. You've got to give him some confidence early and throw some balls around. Maybe not go deep, but maybe do some short routes to let the receivers run out and go do some things with the football after the catch. But I'm sure he's going to be anxious.
Yeah. I can imagine he's pretty nervous.
Yeah.
It's first game, has been a long time since he actually played in a real game.
Yeah.
He mentioned tonight he's got some pregame rituals he likes to stick to. Said he started a tradition at Baylor with 80s and 90s movies.
Yeah, and we were talking about this. He said 80s and 90s movies, and then he mentioned the movie Tommy Boy, which was made like in 95. But yeah, on Friday nights before games, he asks his coaches for like movies he should watch from like the 80s and 90s. He says his favorite movie he's watched is Tommy Boy. His favorite 80s movie is Roadhouse, which elicited a fist pump for me. I couldn't stop it in the press conference room. And I asked him, I go, do you know Dalton's 3 rules? He didn't. I don't think.
Neither did Brandon.
Yeah, I didn't either. I messed up. I messed up one of the rules. But I thought that was interesting. He said he's got a list of 40 movies he needs to check out. And he says he'll just watch them on his iPad in his room. So I would guess Chandler Cox, the fullback, will, like he is here, it will be his roommate. So I wonder if Chandler Cox and him will share a bucket of popcorn and watch an 80s or 90s movies. I wonder who it'll watch. If it's a blowout, I'll be sure to ask him Saturday night, like, what movie did you watch Friday night?
What worked?
Yeah, what worked for you? What movies? But I thought that was funny. Like, most players have a ritual of, I go to bed early and I put my socks in this certain spot and all stuff, like weird stuff like that. Sure. He's just like, I like to watch 80s and 90s movies. It's very interesting. Tommy Boy's a classic, but so's Roadhouse. Roadhouse is actually one of my favorite movies. Patrick Swayze's the best. I mean, any guy that can kick some butt and then flip his hair after breaking a guy's face into a table, that's good acting.
I haven't seen it. I guess I need to catch up on my 80s and 90s movies.
It's kind of bloody. It's pretty violent. He rips a guy's throat out.
Oh.
Literally, like.
Not family friendly.
I don't think it's possible to do that, but he does it.
It's good. It makes good movies, so.
But one of those rules, by the way, Dalton's rules, can be applied to this game. Never, and the number one rule is never underestimate your opponent. Expect the unexpected.
There you go.
So maybe that's why it's his favorite movie.
Well, I think that's definitely something we've learned here at Auburn.
Yeah.
Let's see. Any more questions from our viewers? Let's see. Who do you think will be our go-to wide receiver? Auburn's go-to wide receiver.
I think we'll find out after the first, I'd say 3 weeks of the season, but not even then because Mercer's awful. I'd say first 4 weeks of the season after they go on the road to Clemson and on the road to Missouri, that's when you'll start figuring out who the top 2 receivers, 3 receivers are going to be. If I had to guess right now, I'd say probably Nate Craig Myers, just based off what he did at A-Day and during the spring. Chip Lindsey talked up Kyle Davis a little bit tonight. Kyle sat out the entire spring, didn't even practice. He was dealing with personal business of some sort and didn't return really to practice mode until this August. And he says he's been doing well. Chip the other night on radio mentioned that Darius Slayton and Ryan Davis have really impressed him. And he was asked again about that tonight, and Chip kind of turned that question around to, well, everybody's doing great. I think maybe he got caught in giving praise to 2 single players for the first time ever during preseason and went, whoops, I shouldn't have said that. So keep an eye on Darius Slayton and Ryan Davis. Davis is interesting. He's a smaller guy, obviously, speedy guy, and him and Will Hastings will be sharing a lot of time in the slot. What is that? The 3 or 2? I can't remember. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. But the smaller guys there, Will Hastings and Ryan Davis, you would expect to be splitting time. It certainly sounds like Ryan Davis is doing enough to, one, win that starting spot, but maybe be a big-time contributor. But I think the big play guy that could possibly lead this team in receiving yards is Nate Craig Myers. He was very good catching the long ball last season, or in the spring. And we didn't get to quite see him at full speed last season as a freshman because he was dealing with hamstring issues. So this will be the first time we really get to see a healthy Nate Craig Myers in a college football season.
And do you still expect to get a depth chart from Gus on Tuesday?
I hope so. I would think so. He is never not double negative. Released one on the Tuesday before game week. Is it accurate? That's up to interpretation. But I think we'll get one Tuesday. They'll hand him out. Hopefully they hand him out before he comes in and talks. Sometimes they hold him, protect him, and then he walks in and they hand it out to everybody, and we're like, and everybody's trying to type it out while he's talking. Yeah, so I expect him to release it Tuesday. He said so. He never backtracks on that type of stuff. And though one reporter asked, I don't know if you guys are familiar, Michigan's coach has decided not to release even a roster in the offseason until right before the game. And so someone asked, you ever thought about doing that, Gus? And he's like, yeah, maybe we should do that. And everybody was just like, shut up, don't ask that question. But no, depth chart's coming Tuesday. We have our own depth chart that we predicted at auburnundercover.com. We'll see if it matches up with what they end up saying. Yeah.
Well, hopefully we'll have news on the depth chart for you guys on Tuesday. But I think that's probably about all we have tonight. So tune in on Tuesday to find out who our starters are. We'll see you guys later. We're Auburn Undercover at auburnundercover.com.